Okay, wait. Well, let's try this again. My mic was muted.
I of course, I've never done that. Of course, never ever.
Okay, so let's try this again. Welcome everyone to this week's Catributor podcast. And no guest today, but some very nice topics. So, well, we can start with Napoli. What's probably on everybody's mind?
This is the latest and greatest Italian large cruiser with 254 millimeter guns, so fairly hefty main battery, but they don't necessarily, like, you compare them to, say, Alaska's guns, and it doesn't really feel like they're in the same class necessarily. But its main gimmick is the secondaries. It's got SAP secondaries and quite a long range for a cruiser.
Oh yeah, and it obviously comes with torpedoes, and I think it's relatively tanky for a cruiser, right?
Yeah, the armor is it's not bad. It's only a 25 mil bow, but it's got a 60 mil icebreaker, and the belt is 220. So as long as you're angling and catching things on the belt, it's relatively good. And of course, if you're helped with having the fuel smoke as well. Because, obviously, sometimes you just need that get out of jail free card. Although it being a large caliber cruiser, you have to be aware that if you're doing it really close to other people and you've just fired, you're still going to be spotted.
Yeah, but your secondaries...
8.7 kilometers.
Your secondaries still work, right? And they don't reveal you, so you can't just be a walking secondary smokescreen.
You've got 4 triple 152 mil guns, so 2 fore and 2 aft, and then each side has 3 of those dinky little 90 mil mounts, the very distinctive ones. But I think because they're all SAP, I mean, the 90 mil mounts have 26 millimeters of penetration and 42 mil on the bigger ones. The only downside to them is really that I think the best range you can get is 9.2 kilometers, which is, that's good for a cruiser, but it's not amazing. And also, you don't have a huge broadside, and they're not super duper fast firing. The 90 mils actually do fire relatively quickly, but there aren't as many. Of course, there aren't as many secondary focused cruiser captain skills, so that's the other kind of downside of having a secondary cruiser these days. So it's a bit gimmicky, but it does still work as a heavy cruiser. But you want to be playing it more for the fact that it's a bit gimmicky, because otherwise you'd probably be better off taking the Venezia for the most part. But I think it's a lot sneakier than Venezia.
I don't actually know the concealment values of both.
Venezia has... Oh, that's a rubbish captain. That's my Sansonetti has the heavy SAP, so actually he is that's more. It'll be 12 point something. With Venezia and Napoli, you can get down to 10.3, which is pretty good for a large tier 10 cruiser.
I mean, it definitely helps with the whole idea of trying to get closer. The problem, of course, is obviously that, you still, like, even in a battleship, you can't just push in your deleted if the right situation. So you're always in this weird thing where like brawling would be such a fun and cool feature, but it happens not every game, right?
Yeah. So, it's definitely like, the temptation is to rush in and try and make things happen, and that's probably not going to go well most of the time. So you have to just be on the lookout for the correct circumstances when you're playing ships of this nature that have some kind of gimmick to them or some kind of speciality. And it can be a bit frustrating if you don't get given those situations to work with. So that's definitely something to be aware of when you're playing the Napoli. Probably the main notable thing about it is that it's the second tier 10 that we've had available as a buyable premium.
And a
probably the most controversial thing about it as well.
Yeah, and it's a very expensive. I mean, it's tier 10, right? What do they charge for it? Like 108 or something. I saw, I think, a screenshot earlier with $190. Not sure how much they would charge in euros, but
Yeah, I can just check the store just now. I mean, it'll be
it's
depending on the packages, I suppose. But yeah, it's a bit of a I don't know, whale bait. Would you call it whale bait?
just a cash grab, I think. It is a very good.
Yeah, at least you can't point at it and say, "Oh my god, that's so overpowered." Like just the base ship is, oh wow, that's almost £100, whatever that would be in euros, probably slightly more. That's okay. That's really expensive. Okay, that's definitely whale bait. Good
yeah.
lord.
It's like, I mean, at this point, right, you could probably buy like 2-3 full-priced games for the price of one ship, and that's I don't know. I feel like this is slightly concerning, but then again, you can get it for code. So.
Yes, if you happen to have just accumulated a bunch through, I don't know, buying bits and pieces when it's on sale or using coupons or whatever, you might have accumulated enough to just go, oh yeah, sure, I'll buy that. I will say, I don't. If they're going for that whole targeting people that want to collect every ship thing, I don't think people are like, this is an okay ship, but I wouldn't say it's a blast to play. I wouldn't say most people are missing out not having this ship, to be honest.
Well, then again, like, who is the target? Like, buys just, it's the only tier 10 that you can buy for real money currently. I mean, they had the Yamato in the past, so the question is how many people are they targeting that are just looking to skip because maybe they are new, maybe they think like, I need to get into it. I mean, we are not like, World of Warships is not like an MMO or something, but maybe they feel like, I don't know, they want to skip the grinding process, they just want to immediately jump into tier 10 because they think that's where the battle is. I don't know. I wonder if they're trying to target people like this, which is obviously what the community exactly doesn't want, because we don't want new players immediately at tier 10. I
mean, yeah, that was certainly for a long time always the argument against, and like in World of Tanks, that was one of the big arguments against ever having anything higher than tier 8, and there was a long time there was many people suggesting that people should have a tech tree tier 8 before they'd be allowed to buy a premium tier 8, and I think probably people have suggested that in the past for World of Warships as well, but realistically no company would ever restrict their sales that way.
Yeah, but I mean, at least they always tended to limit it to tier 8. I mean, we've low since past it with tier 9s, and now they're like, it's just basically a trend, right? At first it was like, yeah, okay, we're not selling anything higher than tier 8. Then it started with tier 9s with other resources like free experience, and you're like, yeah, well, you still need to play the game to get that free experience somehow, right? And then it started with shop stuff like balloon ships for tier 9. It's not really that uncommon these days. And now we are slowly encroaching on tier 10. So I believe this is going to be a trend, right? In a year from now, we'll have regular tier 10s appearing in the premium shop.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, you could see the ARP, and that was obviously a collaboration, existing ship in the game. You could see that as maybe being them testing the waters, so to speak, and whatever their sales data showed them, they were comfortable then putting in this for nearly £100. But I would say it's definitely not like the ARP Yamato. It's a Yamato. You've got big smash people in the face guns. You don't necessarily need to be a great player to at least do something with those guns. But I think Napoli is a much harder ship to use. So if people are thinking that, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy my way to tier 10, skip all this grinding, get straight to the tier 10 gameplay, and they get the Napoli, they're probably going to be disappointed for the most part. It's definitely a trickier ship to play.
At least they can't top teammates anymore if that's the first ship there.
True. It would be interesting to. I mean, we kind of got teased a bit with when they were giving their justification of why they were going to sell a tier 10 premium again, was that the numbers of people that had bought an ARP Yamato were actually quite small. So based on their sales data, that they didn't think this was going to have a disproportionate impact on the game. So this is definitely a ship that's it doesn't feel like it's aimed at having a wide scale impact. So it's kind of niche both in terms of its play style, but also in terms of how many they want to see in their game. Although that said, I have seen a bunch of them already at tier 10. So clearly some people somewhere are buying them, and it'll be interesting to see if we get any indicator out of Wargaming as to how well it's done sales wise.
I mean, I guess we will see how many more they sell and how quickly, because the better it works, the more often they're probably gonna use it.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. My big fear is they somehow. I say fear. I say this a bit facetiously, but they'll somehow find a way to tie tier 10 premiums exclusively into loot boxes. They want to do that. That's what they want to do with everything these days. It's just everything must somehow be tied in with loot boxes.
Like you mean, like in most games, there is just a monthly loot box, and there is the grand prize is the tier 10 ship, and there's a bunch of like weaker prizes, and you have like, I don't know, like a 1% chance or even lower to get the grand prize.
I don't want to be cynical, but I totally could see them going, hey, we're gonna give you a monthly subscription for X number of super containers a month kind of thing. I shouldn't give them ideas. I really shouldn't. So yeah, I mean, my feeling is that it's not a bad ship, but it's way overpriced. And it's definitely not a ship with mass appeal. That's my take on it anyway.
Played it yet. I've seen some other people play it so far, and it's definitely something I'm interested in trying out, simply because I love secondaries a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I've seen so far, it doesn't seem like it's gonna like reinvent the wheel or be overpowered or anything. It might just be a decent, fun, niche little ship.
And the main problem with going full secondaries is you have to take the secondary battery modification and to get a bit of extra range and a bit better dispersion. But that, of course, means you can't take aiming systems mod, which is if you don't have it, and I have tried a bit both ways. If you don't have the aiming systems mod, the main battery is it doesn't feel great. We'll put it that way. It doesn't quite feel as bad as the Italian battleship dispersion, but it definitely impacts your overall performance. For what is it? Without it, you get like 8 kilometers. With it, you get like 9.2. So you for the best possible range on the secondaries, it's still not that great, and it does come at a fairly significant cost to your main battery performance. And there really is only the one. I'm just checking now, but I think there really is only the one 4th level skill that affects secondaries. In fact, the only 3rd level skill that really affects secondaries is Adrenaline Rush, I think.
Yeah, they really got that cruiser from like the secondary features.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one to like after the confinement almost of all the secondary skills to the battleship tree. So then go, here's a secondary cruiser. When you can't really spec into it that well, and it's not like it gets like if it was sort of Massachusetts, Georgia, and Ohio level of secondary accuracy just out of the box, then maybe, but it doesn't have that.
I mean, I'm kind of looking forward to trying it out, but I mean, like I said, the most, I guess, interesting or controversial part about this ship is really just how it's sold, right? If they just made it a regular coal ship, people would have probably been like, yeah, a nice addition, right? And now people are like just face palming and asking themselves just why.
I do have to wonder, looking at anyone that in game, obviously, I and you would have been given this. Well, were given this by Wargaming, but there's no way in hell I would ever pay £100 for a premium in World of Warships. That just would never happen.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, like who pays like the price for 2 basically full price AAA titles for a ship in? Well, okay, there's some people who might, but it seems like they've gone a bit over it. They're
Fact that it's an
just trying to
Italian
test
ship
the
as
limits.
well. I mean, it's not that I have anything against Italian ships. In fact, I think the Italian ships are some of the best looking ships in the game and in real life as well, which is probably very unpatriotic of me to say that. But yeah, there are lines that surely would have more appeal to people, and it maybe just feels like they picked this one because it maybe happened to be the next tier 10 that they had coming through the modeling pipeline, rather than any other like appeal factor. So I don't really know. It doesn't feel like this was a carefully chosen choice for being the next tier 10 premium after the Yamato. Because, you know, Yamato, iconic ship.
I mean,
here you can buy a Yamato and skip right to tier 10 and you know exactly what you're getting. Whereas this is obviously a paper design on a tree that is relatively new and probably not all that many people play through. It just, I don't know, it feels like an odd choice to me in a lot of ways.
I mean, but let's be honest, like the Yamato they sold was the Yamato. I feel like people who are looking for an iconic ship wouldn't go for an anime.
Yeah, but I mean, if you can overlook the name, you can basically toggle the camo off and have it
Yeah,
just
but then
like
you
normal
can't mount
Yamato.
another camo, right?
You can, well, I mean, you can use the import filter to
Okay.
make it just look like the regular perma camo, which is actually what I do with some ships myself these days. So yeah. So yeah, personally, I don't know how you feel about the notion of selling tier 10 premiums overall, but I'm kind of like, at this price point, I'm kind of I feel like it's taking the whittle a bit, shall we say?
I mean, I feel like is it really necessary? So Wargaming tries to argue with it won't have that big of an impact. But I mean, if it wouldn't have, and like if it wouldn't make enough money, they wouldn't bother, right? So they are expecting it to sell well enough for them to be worthwhile to sell it. And they just admit they sign off, like it's something that Wargaming tries, I feel like, a lot, right? If something is a negative impact on the game, they try to argue, yeah, but if it statistically doesn't happen that often, then it's not a problem, right? They are like, okay, it's like, you know, if you fall down the stairs, it doesn't matter because most people didn't, right? So, yeah, okay, maybe you broke your leg, but that's fine because if not enough people break their legs, it's not a concern. Sort of a way, right? It doesn't matter how much. If we do harm, but we do it just a very little bit of harm, then it's fine.
I would think economically they would certainly be expecting to sell more of these than the Yamato, because the Yamato, they already have that model. It was just a matter of reskinning it. Whereas this is a whole new ship that's come through the pipeline, and so therefore has cost more to produce. So they're obviously expecting more back.
Yeah, but like, I mean, just offering like, I mean, on the one hand, in a game like this, you just need to keep the people playing because they will start spending money on something, right? And you can sell them like a premium time or whatever, or maybe flags or whatever they need, right? So you just need to keep content that they're interested in, and by adding like a ship for coal, people grind the coal, people like doing the dailies for that, and they might eventually spend money on things. So it's not like you have to directly sell a ship to make money. If you just produce content and keep the people in the game, they are just gonna spend money.
And also, of course, it's always worth bearing in mind in these discussions of wargaming or any free-to-play company selling things is that the people that don't ever pay anything or rarely pay anything are still really important in the equation as well, because the people that do pay need people to play against. So,
Yeah.
you know, the whole ecosystem matters really. But yeah. Anyway,
Well, I mean,
we'll see how it does. It'll be interesting to see what the impact is. I mean, just in terms of the ship itself, though, it's certainly not overpowered or anything.
I mean, we can lead there into like the Borodino, the other premium that has recently been released. Maybe less. I mean, it's just your tier. Like, if they sell tier 8 ships, I've been fine with that because they have done that for ages. I just wish they would have stuck to that, I suppose. But the Borodino itself, it seems like one of those ships with an identity crisis, right?
I actually did a video on this not long ago, and I have to say it almost feels French. It's something a cross between the Dunkirk and the Champagne at tier 8. Only it doesn't have the same dispersion that Champagne does, where it retains better accuracy at longer ranges. It's battle cruiser dispersion curve, so it's just better at all ranges than standard battleship dispersion.
Yeah, but like, see, this is where I feel like, so they have the layout with the main guns in the front,
the Dunkirk,
which would be pretty amazing, right? If you got close, because you can basically nose in, and that would be an advantage if you want to get close, but you don't want to get close because you're so squishy.
Yeah, just like Champagne, basically.
Yeah. And then they slap a radar on it, a radar that's utterly useless unless you once again get close, right? So you have like those tools that want you to get closer, but then they don't let you get closer.
I'll be honest. I actually think the radar is like the only limiting factor I found with radar is that you only get 3 charges with Superintendent. I've actually ended up using the radar a fair bit because it's 12 kilometers and it lasts for 30 seconds, which is enough of a duration that your allies can start shooting at things as well. So
it's a pretty powerful radar, yeah.
Yeah, it does honestly at times feel a bit unfair when you can blap somebody unsuspecting that might have glanced at the team list, think, oh, okay, there's not going to be any radar cruisers nearby, and then there you are, and then they get their ass blasted by everyone that can now see them.
But it means like you have to
pushing in to do that, yeah.
Yeah, you position a bit like a cruiser, right? You play it a little bit cruiser-ish, like next to an island, maybe close to the camp, so that you can go into cover if you need to. But you just don't really have the tankiness to stay too much in the front.
It's an awkward ship to play. I mean, you couple that with the 1,060 meter turning radius, and I think it's got the sort of usual 15-16 second not turret traverse. That would be amazing on a battleship. No, rudder shift. And it makes disengaging sometimes really awkward, because if you show any amount of broadside, it's like the Champagne, but 25 millimeters of armor is an incredible liability, and the Champagne maneuvers so much better, and the Champagne also has speed boost, which Borodino doesn't, although it is still a pretty fast ship. So, yeah. Overall, I mean, I really like the guns, I have to say. 16-inch guns with that accuracy, even if it's a 31-second reload. So it could be a little better on the reload, but yeah, the guns are just chef's kiss quite a lot of the time. But the trick the rest of the time is actually staying alive to try and use them. And if your team leaves your flank exposed, or you get caught in a bad push or whatever, and then you cannot maneuver because you'll be shown broadside and you end up having to back up, and all you've got is that 25 millimeter bow between you and oblivion, then things can go bad real fast. Especially if you get caught backing up like that as well. You're an excellent target for anything with torpedoes or, of course, aircraft carriers as well. So it's a really awkward ship to play, but I kind of like it, even though it's also quite challenging.
Yeah, but I mean, it depends how much. You can just like play it as a backline sniper, then it's not so challenging, and with the accurate guns, it would work. Well, that's exactly what we don't want, is like backline sniping. So they put the radar on it to trick people into just charging in, possibly. I don't know.
To be fair, they've only given it 19.6 kilometers range, which is still pretty good. But I mean, considering the ranges that you can get in with the tier 10 matches that you will very regularly see, isn't actually as much as it sounds like. And I don't think it's a super stealthy ship either. Let's see. Concealment 13.7, nearly 14 kilometers. So it's what, 5, nearly 6 kilometers of between your surface detection and your max range, which isn't actually that much in the scheme of things. So being a stealthy backline sniper is a lot of the time easier said than done in this ship, I think. I think it's probably a lot easier in the
I'll
Champagne.
be honest, I don't believe any ship needs more than 20-kilometer range. Unfortunately, there are quite a few that have a bit more, but it's like, if you are sitting like 19 kilometers from your target, you're going to be.
I mean, it is easier to dodge at those ranges, to be fair. For most targets, anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't like the concept of the Borodino. It feels like there were some ideas just taped together that don't like it's not a complete experience. Like the different parts of the ship don't mesh well together, right? They had a few ideas, they threw them together, they shook them a little bit, put some tape around it, balanced it on a spreadsheet and threw it out without actually considering if the whole concept makes sense.
I don't know. To be honest, the most iffy thing for me was that it has a radar. I would have gladly had this ship without radar, but with some other better characteristic. Because I feel like certain parts of it are definitely gimped just so it can kind of justify having that radar.
Yeah, I mean, they could have made it into a better sniper, but that's also not. That would have made more sense, but it wouldn't be like a good addition to the game if they'd made it better at sniping, I feel like. So at least in that regard, I'm happy that they haven't gone more that route. What I would have liked, but that's just me because I like brawling, I would have just made it a well-armored ship with a worse dispersion, and then with the front-facing guns, it would make a very good frontline tank, and then you can slap a radar on it that also makes sense that you can use. But I just want everything to like be at the front brawling, so that's it might just
sounds like you need to play in the Russian server. That's a bit of a reputation of everything just being,
Yeah, I mean, I've never played this, so I couldn't.
Well, I should actually try that sometime.
Yeah, should we move on, or do we have more to tell about the Borodino?
I don't think there's much more to say.
Yeah. Which would bring us to submarines once more.
Yeah, there've been some balancing changes, and of course people have had a chance to play on the test server. Although I haven't actually bothered to get around to it yet. It's just been kind of a low priority for me, to be honest.
I mean, I feel like I've watched other people go through the painful process of playing submarines and saw like them and their feedback, because it's like, I don't know, like they've been working on subs for like over a year. They've had multiple tests, and after all this time, there is still no role for subs. They still don't make sense. They still don't really fit into the game. It's still the counterplay and so on is questionable. It's like there doesn't seem to be any progress, right? They have worked on this for a year, and from the very beginning, a lot of people said, me included, that they don't make sense in the game. And well, what's your plan? And Wargaming never had a plan. Now they have played around for over a year, and it's clear they still don't have a plan. And now they're just we'll do it anyway.
They do seem rather determined to get these in the game regardless of whether they actually fit or not. And I've been kind of skeptical from the very start as to whether these would fit in general battles or not. And so far that skepticism only seems to have been borne out by the various different iterations we've had. So yeah, I honestly... if they never came into the game, I don't think we'd be missing much, to be honest.
I mean,
or if they did come into the game as a special, their own mode or some kind of special operations only thing, would be fine.
I mean, it's like, what are you going to do, right? So you start in your submarine in a battle. What can you do? You could like try to go into the camp with a destroyer, but it feels like you are just like the sidekick, right? The destroyer is the main protagonist. and you are just there to maybe help a little bit, because as yourself, you won't be taking this cap, right? You don't really have the tools to do that a lot. You aren't really doing the spotting, so you aren't even helping the team that much. You need the destroyer to be your eyes, you need the destroyer to be your support and backup. And if the destroyer gets traded and runs away, all you can do is dive and hope for it to come back or retreat as well, right? You're basically just the side. The most thing you can probably do, the best thing you can do is like farm battleships, because they can't really do much, but then you need to use your speed, like your speed that's not so fast. Spend probably 10 minutes sailing around the map and hoping to get into the enemy battleship line, and then hoping that you can actually farm them in a reasonable amount of time and that they don't just move away.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to see them having any kind of effective role without massively restructuring the entire basis of the game, which is obviously not what wargaming is doing or has ever planned to do. Subs are an entirely an afterthought. We kind of have that by Wargaming's own admission that they were never really intended to be in the game, but they're now trying to kind of squeeze this square peg into a round hole anyway, and it's just not quite fitting for some reason, oddly enough.
Some days I feel like that a lot of the gameplay in World of Warships was an accident, you know. When I look at the gameplay, I see like, okay, there are different roles, like there's spotting, there is tanking. In simplest terms, it's almost like you have tanks, you have support, and you have damage dealers, right? Damage dealer just basically means if you don't do anything else, you just do damage, and then you better be consistent, right? I mean, everybody does damage, but if you have like a cruiser that's just like long range shooting stuff, then that's relatively a consistent way of doing damage, I suppose, unless you get like lol penned. But if you're like a Shimakaze with torpedoes, that's oftentimes an inconsistent way of doing damage, because your torpedoes, they require the enemy to be somewhat in range, and you can get zoned out and things like that. So if damage is the only thing you bring to the table, you'd better be consistent. And submarines don't have any utility aside from damage, it feels like. And they are not that great consistent.
Yeah, it's hard to see them, like, they don't fit in any other role. They don't have any other kind of utility to them. And be honest, you know, and this is just going by previous playtests rather than the current one, but they're just kind of tedious overall. Like, there's a lot that could be forgiven if they were still somehow fun to play and fun to play against, but they just aren't. Also, I've just received a gift sub, so thank you very much to Peachy's Place for that. A gift sub on Atem's channel.
Yeah, thanks, Peaches. Much appreciated. So yeah, we can also like take a look at it. That's also something, right? When you look at the list of changes, it just is clear just how early they are in the development process, because there is a large number of sweeping changes that I've made. So, and like, let's keep in mind, right? They haven't tested submarines and decided this is a good state and then introduced them. They've tested submarines, then announced a list of changes, then made a short PTS test for the next patch where they're being introduced. So this is like the first time once again that the current submarines have been tested. Now there are some last minute changes and then they roll out in rank, which in itself is a lot of questionable, because they said after the cavalry rework that they won't rush this again, and this time they want to do it like, you know, slowly. I mean, they're doing that by putting it on in ranked, I suppose, but it's like, it feels once again just way too rushed.
I mean, in terms of the amount of time they've taken on it so far, I mean, they've been in development for, well, we can say years at this point. So not rushed in that regard, but in terms of they've never actually managed to find a place for them in the game, and yet they're still being brought forward anyway. I suppose, yeah, it kind of does in that way.
So I mean, what did they change? They changed sonar ping and torpedo ranges. Those are just small ranges. That seems kind of fine. Then
these announced ones are just kind of tweaks, really.
yeah,
Don't know if there's anything
I mean the bigger changes was like things like the torpedoes changing. That is now approximately 2.5 times high on average. So that's a huge one.
Is that underwater sub versus sub combat? Because I remember that being
I suppose
really
it means that it will be a lot harder for a sub now to dodge another sub, but in a way it has been tedious, but isn't that going to make it a lot dumber, right? It's like you ping the sub, you launch the torps, and because the subs are now a lot, you can't like with diving up and down basically becomes a lot more useless in sub versus sub combat, it sounds like, because torps just won't care.
Yeah. So at that point, if you run into another sub and they get the torpedo off first, are you just screwed? I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that works from a kind of academic point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I'll find that out by watching other people, because I'm not gonna subject my dev to this. Probably ranked with subs, no thank you.
It's funny because there are loads of sub games out there. You know, it's a long established genre, but I don't think anyone's ever tried to put a sub game into quite this, or submarines in a video game into this sort of context, this kind of arcadey context like this before. And that's, you know, I guess purely because submarines fulfilled a very, very different role in real life. We've probably talked a bunch about this.
Yeah.
Or that subs attacking capital ships was a comparatively rare thing, and subs attacking surface warships compared to their main role of attacking transport ships is again comparatively rare.
You know, that reminds me, like they adjusted the visibility range by other submarines, and when emitting sonar ping in a smoke. Because you were talking about like how this is an arcade game. Like, can you imagine like a submarine hiding in a smoke screen, just sitting on the surface and just spamming pings and torpedoes stationary? And that's exactly what you expect when you think about submarine, right? And submarine combat. Sitting on a surface stationary in a smoke screen and spamming torpedoes.
Totally. Yeah, I think the consensus is we both remain deeply unconvinced this is a good idea for the game. I don't think we've had any guests on so far where we've covered subtopics that's been particularly excited about it either.
Yeah, I have not met the person yet that, like, every person that likes submarines is like, yeah, they could make a good game mode, a special game mode, but nobody has ever been able to find how they fit in the game.
Oh, we should probably move on to what was our next topic going to be?
Classes in general, and
yes, that was it.
I mean, it feeds a little bit into like the submarines, a new class that now coming into the game, and matchmaking in general.
Idea. Yeah.
It's like World of Warships has become more diverse, definitely, in a sense. So we have not just like heavy and light cruisers, we now have basically super cruisers, or however you want to call it, like the big ones like Alaska. We have hybrids in the game, and we have also in like regular classes like Divergence, when you have like more open water gunboat destroyers and like sneak peek hack destroyers, and they just can't fulfill the same role. So,
yes, especially the ones like there's a big divide between the destroyers that have smoke and the destroyers that don't have smoke, for example.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily smoke, I'd say, because a Halland can still sorta try to do. You have to be more careful, but with the heal and you can still do camps. But there's definitely ones that have neither smoke nor good concealment that like can't really do much.
The ones that you can build that way for sure. So yeah, basically, I do think there is scope for this to have an expanded set of, I don't know what you call them, new classes or maybe just subclasses of ships. Because at the moment we now have actual battle cruisers in the game. We've had battle cruisers since the very beginning with like the Congo. and certainly the Myogi. We have these kind of heavy, large gunboaty destroyers, some of which have as many hit points as mid-tier cruisers do. We have sometimes destroyers without smoke. We have a fairly big gap sometimes between. It's like if you look at matchmaking, you can sometimes end up with matches where you've got one side having a lot of radar cruisers and another side not having radar cruisers. So that could be its own distinct category. You've got the super cruisers, as you were saying, which kind of halfway in between a heavy cruiser and a battleship almost. What else have you got? I mean, potentially you could have distinction between fleet carriers and light carriers. I mean, there's I think some notion that wargaming might add in new lines of carriers at some point in the future, consisting at least partly of the ones they removed from the odd tiers. I'm trying to think what else you could divvy things up by, but yeah, I think there's a lot of scope for adding these subclasses in that would make matchmaking potentially a lot more balanced. And I kind of almost wish we had someone from Wargaming here to bounce the idea off, but I already know that the answer would probably be just, well, we might think about it in the far future, but we don't want to monkey with the matchmaker too much.
I mean, with the official response, like this is not a new idea, and this is not an idea that just we have brought up, right? Since like the hybrids were the last time when it was a bit of outrage, and people are like, guys, you need to like look at the matchmaker. And Warships, Wargaming's answer is always, this isn't a problem. This isn't a problem. There aren't enough to care, and the ships are like balanced or whatnot, and it doesn't make a difference, and so on, right? So basically, Wargaming never really acknowledged that there's a problem in the first place. And if they do, then they're like, oh no, we couldn't do that because matchmaker constraints or whatnot. Like, wasn't it like on a Mingles with Jingles recently where Jingles said that they can balance it in World of Tanks rank, but not in random battles?
Yeah, who was it that it was like Klaus or somebody had basically kept tabs on, was it wheeled vehicles? Because World of Tanks is treated the same way, is it like wheeled vehicles and light tanks are, I think, still treated as the same class, and you've got your heavies and your super heavy tanks. Some heavy tanks, they're heavy tanks in name only, and there's a lot of variation, but there's almost more variation in warships now that we have things like hybrids.
I mean, I could, like, hybrids is something where I see that right now you probably might have a problem, because if you because like there is just one like a tier 6 hybrid battleship, right? So you can't like have a whole category for just one ship. That would be a bit problematic to balance it out. But in time that will fill, I'm sure.
If there are enough of them added, but for other things like the super cruisers or I mean, I think I definitely have mooted the idea several times in the past, and I'm sure a whole lot of other people have as well. But the idea of having some kind of tag in the matchmaker to even out the number of radar cruisers per team, that's been an idea for a long time.
Oh yeah, or just like if you have like a Seattle and the enemy has an Alaska, it's just not quite the same. Even though they are both classified as tier 9 cruisers, I would say that one team might have the distinct advantage there.
You'd have to still weight it by the actual tiering of the matchmaker. I mean, if one side has an Atlanta and the other side has an Indianapolis, then that's okay.
Oh yeah. You know what I've been thinking about? What would be like if Wargaming, like we don't really believe their argument that the matchmaker couldn't do better or that the queue times would be so long.
That feels more like the stock answer of we don't want to, so we're just going to give this answer.
But I've been thinking about this, and there would be a very simple solution what you could do, and this is like add a second, what do you call it, matchmaker balancing tool after the first. Like once a battle is found, right, and you have basically 24 players, you could out of that pool still do adjustments, right? Because we've all been in games where, well, let's say one one side has three Alaskas and one has three Seattles or so. You could swap one Seattle with an Alaska unless they're division. Or if one team has like 5 raiders and the other has none, right? You could. I've been in plenty of matches where tier-wise, ship type-wise, and division-wise it would have worked. You could have, with that pool of players, you could have made so many more balanced matches, right? So you could easily have a tool that analyzes like that they would find battles as quickly as right now, and then while you're loading I mean, computers are pretty fast these days, right? I'm sure they could switch a few ships in a couple of seconds.
I don't think there's any issue of technical feasibility whatsoever. This is purely down to if Wargaming has the will to actually do it or not.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I feel like
it's not really the kind of hot topic that's going to get a sudden overwhelming amount of public support behind it. So it's hard to see it ever actually coming to fruition. But if we can nudge them about it enough, maybe someday they'll at least consider testing out some changes.
If you'd at least balance, like after you found the match a little bit, it takes away their arguments, right? And then they'd have to admit the real argument. I wonder about this. Like, I mean, one is obviously they don't feel like it's gonna make them enough money to be worth the effort. But another is I feel like they'd have to admit that maybe not all ships are created equal in a sense, right? They'd have to actually look at this, and when they say, okay, you are if you have a Seattle instead of an Alaska, you're at a disadvantage. People might ask them, but they are, why aren't they balanced, right? And then Wargaming would have to say, no, they are balanced. But while I mean, the one team might have a disadvantage, but they are still balanced. I don't know. I feel it's like if you acknowledge that there's a problem, then you can't like put your head in the sand as much and pretend there is no longer
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's always been. I mean, I don't know how much this is a holdover from the kind of design philosophy they inherited from World of Tanks, where touching the matchmaker was like, the matchmaker was always almost sacred. You didn't touch the matchmaker. The changes that were made were very, very few and far between. And like the last big change to the matchmaker I can think was I can't even remember. Was it stretching some of there used to be things, there were certain lines, like this is going way back, but like, was it medium tanks and light tanks and certainly artillery? They didn't go all the way to tier 10. Some of them stopped at tier 8, but the matchmaker would have different rules for, like, sometimes you'd get certain tier 5 light tanks would get into tier 10 games, for example, because they were sort of super scouts, and then they kind of regularized it all and made changes. But it's always been, for a very long time now, that +2, and they've been unwilling to consider +1, and that's not even such a thing in World of Warships.
Yeah,
but there's still so much scope for things they could do, but they seem similarly reluctant to ever touch the matchmaker unless something is drastically wrong. Maybe it was the artillery cap. That was probably the biggest, most recent change to the matchmaker and World of Tanks. So I don't know how long ago it is you played World of Tanks, but there was an infamous period where there was just increasing numbers of artillery, especially at high tiers, and you would have literally 10 out of 12 tanks per team would be artillery in kind of rare cases. And so finally they went, oh yeah, that's a problem. Maybe we'll cap the number of artillery.
I've stopped playing World of Tanks when the personal missions came out.
Okay. So that's probably a fair bit more recent than that then. They kind of, I mean, it took them long enough to sort of regularize and equalize carriers in World of Warships, and so you don't get asymmetric carrier games anymore. But they're still very reluctant to have a kind of cap of 1 per team.
I mean, when Warships came out, you had a lot of asymmetric teams, right? Where one team like had 3 destroyers and the other had 2 or just 1 and so on. Like, so they have worked a little bit on the matchmaking. Also, like, I think the most recent change in Warships was like when they made tier 8 sort of playable-ish again by having like the pure tier 10 battles at times, which took quite a few tier 10s out of it. So tier 8 is now able to get top tier sometimes. But tier 7s are still pretty screwed these days, I guess. But they've somewhat. When did they make the last matchmaker changes? Maybe a year or 2 ago. But there was a slight improvement at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it kind of, in some ways, it just shifted the problem around between different tiers.
Yeah.
And probably having the protected matchmaking at the lower tiers was a good thing overall as well.
But it's like that we now have like basically pure battles where everyone is tier 10 or things like that, and they work fine. It just shows that a lot of this is possible, and that Wargaming could probably easily make a +/-1.
Yeah, that's certainly at the same. I mean, for a long time, and again, going back to World of Tanks, you had people arguing that it would limit the diversity of the lineups you would see too much. But past a certain point, there was just enough vehicles in the game that wasn't really an argument that held any amount of water, and that's certainly true in World Warships these days as well. There are more than enough ships in the game that I think. Yeah, you would have to adjust some ships to take account for +1, -1, but I think there's probably no real reason you could do it apart from maybe the matchmaking would have to run for slightly longer. It certainly would have a bigger impact on some servers than others.
I mean, true, but you can always say
how
like
hard and fast they made the rule, because there's been these suggestions of it looks for X number of seconds for a +1 game, and then if it goes beyond that, it puts you in a +2 game.
Yeah, exactly. And when that's easily fixed, right? For the first 30 seconds, it just looks for a +1 game, and afterwards it accepts the +2 again, right?
Yeah.
And it would make it probably a lot better for a lot of ships.
I'd love it if they'd even just try it on a test server.
Yeah,
the one time they've tested it in World of Tanks, I think it was only on the Asian server for a limited period, and it was something to do with server population, and they basically had a little experiment for like 6 months. And everyone got really excited because they were like, oh yeah, maybe they'll bring it to our servers as well. But no. Experiment ended, and then that was that. Never got heard of again.
But that's just like so I don't know, Wargaming, they'll be like, okay, so we have this change that probably doesn't work so well when there is low server population, so let's try it somewhere where there is very low server population. Oh my god, it didn't work as well as as you guys. I mean, that who could have predicted that we'll do that nowhere now.
I don't know if it was as much as that. I can't remember the specifics, but I think it was trying to give more same tier matchmaking for kind of mid and low tiers.
Okay.
And I think +2 was still possible, but just a lot less likely. But yeah, I honestly, I really wish they would. I really wish they would give us at least a test of +1. But might not happen in my lifetime.
I highly like. I mean, if they had plans to do that, they could have done. I mean, you'll never know what they do. But I feel like somehow Wargaming would need to feel like they. From this, I do feel like that the tier difference is not just for players, but I feel like they think they can make some kind of profit with it in a sense. In a sense, maybe like if you see higher tier ships. Or if you are forced to fight higher tier ships, it incentivizes you to get to tier 10 so you can finally be top tier every time or something. Or if you like get destroyed by a higher tier ship, you feel like, hey, I want to get that now, right? I want to be the person with the higher tier ship. And also it means that like even like more casual players might have like more moments of awesome in a sense because they are just in a better ship. So they'll perform better. And that makes them feel better. Obviously, that's counterbalanced by the fact that sometimes they higher tier ships. So I'm not sure how much. It would be interesting what the psychological effects are of that matchmaker and if it actually incentivizes people to like get to higher tiers or not.
Yeah, that's a harder one because you're kind of relying on more kind of like industry ideas at that point. How do you specifically test that sort of thing? Because you still have, even in +1, you still have the opportunity to be high tier, blapping lower tier vehicles, and have that kind of powerful feeling, I guess, is what they're going for. But yeah, it's, I don't know. To me, the negatives, it always seems counterintuitive to me because of the way that the human brain works. Is that we can tend to process negatives or register negatives more strongly than positives in a lot of scenarios. And so surely, to me, it's always seemed like kind of a backwards thing that people would think, oh yeah, I'll get to be in that ship someday. Where my reaction would be, well, no, surely they're more likely to be looking at the situation in that they're in right now and thinking, man, this sucks. I don't want to play this anymore because I keep getting situations like this.
I guess, but it would also depend on how long you've been playing this, because if you're like a new player and you're still feeling like this is a great game, you still have a lot that you haven't seen and explored yet, right? And you don't take it maybe as seriously, you don't understand the mechanics anyway this much. I feel like you overlook a lot of bad things early on when you start a new game, right? And the more the routine sets in and the more the shine comes off, the more you notice all the annoying underlying things. So I feel like as a new player, maybe it would motivate you a bit more. It would give you a convenient excuse for why you lost. It's like, because I don't have this overpowered tank yet, and I just have to make it there. But I don't know. That's why I feel like I wonder if this is part of the reasoning. And I wonder if there would have ever been any studies done on that, because I would find it fascinating to see if there is.
I just almost wonder if Wargaming doesn't want to do it because they might find that people do prefer it, and then they'd have to actually
admit they were wrong.
Intention of changing it. Yeah. Maybe they're just so settled in the current model that it's like I say, it seems like a kind of doctrinal thing of you must have at least +2. I mean, way back in the day, Wall of Tanks was +3 matchmaking, which was horrendous. It almost seems a miracle it survived to grow a large enough player base to get to the point where they at least went down to +2, -2.
Yeah, but I feel like World of Tanks had it found a pretty good niche because there wasn't really much competition. And once again, in the early days of the game, people forgive a lot of things, and at the same time, you've had, if you were that top tier tank, then in the end, and you could farm all the others, I feel like a lot of people might have just really stuck through it because they wanted to be the top tops, and they wanted to go. And it's especially if you face, I mean, World of Tanks, the tier differences are even bigger than in World of Warships, right? So if you're a tier 10 tank and you face a tier 7, you're kind of god. So a lot of the average players might just have gotten 3, 4, 5 kill games out of it just because the tank was so much more powerful. And that might be really something that at the early stages kept people grinding.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's we're then almost getting into sort of philosophical discussions of how much of the point of a free-to-play game is to get to the end versus the playing of the game itself, kind of thing. The grind versus the end game. And I mean, personally, to me, if it was just get to the end game, get to the tier 10s, I probably wouldn't play. You have to enjoy the process, surely. Because if you don't enjoy the process of playing the game, then it's not like anything radically changes when you get up to tier 10. It's just those are the biggest, most powerful ships. The actual gameplay is still essentially the same. You're still sailing around, shooting at things in the same manner. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree with this, and I've always said there is no rush to get to tier 10. And if you find a ship that you like, no matter the tier, you just keep it and you keep playing it, right? Because it's not like the game gets magically more fun at tier 10. It's different. There are different ships, and I do personally enjoy quite a few of the higher tier ships, but it doesn't mean that the game can't be fun on lower tiers, or equally sometimes more fun, right? But there is, I remember like one of the earlier Gamescoms I was at, and I was just talking with random players there, and I remember some people like basically saying that they don't play the tier 10s because there's no point, because they don't get experience for anything anymore, they can't do anything like. And I just be like, but wouldn't it be fun? And they're like, no, if there is no progress anymore, then they stop playing it. So there are definitely the kind of players who need some sort of progress. That's why Wargame is probably adding a lot of stuff to do for tier 10s and make so many game modes and stuff around the higher tiers.
Yeah, they're always. I suppose that's the almost the Achilles heel of any kind of online free-to-play game, is they always have to be looking for some way to provide players with a sense of progression. The big thing with attacks at the moment is they're looking at doing I think we've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but the crew overhaul.
Oh,
that's basically like, it's mechanically the current crew system is fine, but they're obviously looking for some way to, something to give players to grind, and they've settled on crews. And well, Water Warships, meanwhile, is still at a stage where they can probably keep adding ship lines for a while yet,
but they gave us 2 more captain points and a shitload of experience with the rework, so we can have more diverse builds, more points to spend.
Yeah. That was more an extension of the current system rather than a complete
but it's a pretty massive grind for a lot of people.
Yeah. It is just adding grind on top of the extra, on top of the current system.
So we've gone a little bit off topic from the matchmaking, but I guess the point is still they should take more classes into account, and if nothing else, they could at least balance within like the game itself once it's found a match, because that would be simple. But Wargaming would have to first admit that maybe not all ships were created equal.
Yeah, certainly, and even just with the one class we know they are going to add, i.e. submarines, there's still big question marks over how much that it's going to affect like the surface ships, with however many slots get taken up by subs instead. Because even just from the experience of those late night matches where you sometimes get the wacky matchmaking of like 10 ships or 7 ships per team or whatever, it can actually change things quite a lot. Or even you play ranked and it's usually far fewer ships than in a random game. It definitely makes for a different experience.
I mean, it's also like it might make other problems more visible, because if they want, or what they've announced a while back, I said they just say destroyers and submarines together will have a maximum number, right? So maximum, I don't know, from 5 destroyers plus subs. Mm-hmm. But if there would be now 3 subs, right, it means there would only be 2 destroyers left. And that means if one of those destroyers or both of them are like, I don't know, Elbings that are not that great at capping, or maybe like a French Clipper or something in there, that means once again, because the destroyers are already a diverse class where not everybody can basically do the scouting and capping job, it makes the problem even more prevalent, because now in the destroyer slot is shared with subs in a sense. Mm-hmm. And they certainly can do that.
Yeah, they have actually quite different roles. Not that subs have any particular strong role outside of niche damage dealer, but yeah, they have explicitly ruled out adding more, like adding separate sub slots on top of the 12 per team that are there already. So yeah, who knows?
Subs flip a camera on the surface. No, subs need to surface for that, but subs have very limited visibility, which means they are often essentially blind. So subs need the other people to spot for them. And like that means they can, the thing is, right, as a sub you can very easily be surprised in a sense because you're really blind. So if you want to say, like you drive your sub into the camp and try to do the camping, then suddenly a destroyer appears and maybe farms you and you're screwed. So you might not want to do that. So that's why I said, like, as a sub, you're more like a sidekick. You need the destroyer to spot for you, and maybe you need the destroyer to help you out, because unless a sudden battleship appears, it might just farm you.
Yeah. We've drifted back to subs, really, haven't we?
Well, I mean, the topics are in a sense all
the topics do
connected.
mesh, yeah.
So, but I think I will. I should probably at least give them the feedback that they could add a matchmaker after the matchmaker to just balance out teams. I just can feel what the answer to that will be already, but maybe it's worth typing it out.
I have a weird feeling I might even have seen it suggested previously, but you know,
possibly. I don't read all the feedback.
Worth doing it again, I guess. So shall we move on to, I guess, what is really the last thing, which is the new collaboration. It's an anime collaboration, but this time it's not anime girls with huge, eye-catching, prominent round features. It's anime boys instead. Well, at least the captains. But the skins, I actually kind of like the look of the skins, I have to say. I don't know anything about this anime, but I do rather like the look of the skins.
No question, right? I have the captains in front of me, and the most left one of those pictures, I couldn't tell you if that's male or female, which is also an anime thing. But it possibly boy, possibly not. Let's just say it like this. Also, what I find interesting is that it's like the Legend of the Galactic Heroes, die Neue These. For some reason, like the second part is in German.
Anime is like it's weird. They like to throw in snippets of other languages into titles and other random places, and I don't know, because it's all like sophisticated and European or something. It's exotic. Germany, it's so exotic. Well, it probably is when you live in Japan.
Yeah, I guess. Also, I just see like permanent camouflage Brünhild for August from Parseval. So I guess there is some German in that anime. You'd like, there must be some German connection. I wouldn't call somebody Brünhild.
I mean, it seems to be one of those anime where they're at least paying lip service to not all of the characters explicitly being Japanese, but then you might end up with some quite weird sounding names that are kind of almost but not quite proper sounding names in their respective languages, like Dusty Attenborough. It's just that's just, I don't know. That's definitely not a name that's been come up with by somebody who is actually from an English language country at all. I have no idea how Siegfried Kirchheis, or however that's pronounced, comes across, but yeah. Guessing it can't be too dissimilar. Reinhard von Lohengram.
I don't think I have all the names of those guys.
It's just above the bit with the captain portraits. It has the unique voiceovers.
Okay. Reinhard von Lohengram. Siegfried Kirchheis. That's I wonder how, like, I mean, Kirch would be almost like Kirche is church, right? And ice is basically, ice, like ice cream. So it's I don't know. It's an interesting combination for a name, I suppose. I'm not sure if there is actually people with that name, but it sounds fun.
Yeah, definitely. It's that kind of almost distinctive thing I've noticed from the anime that I have watched, Well, a lot of the non-Japanese names just sound really weird. But yeah, the actual camos, I do quite like them, and certainly more so than the existing spacey camos that we've had, especially that Z23 camo.
The Z23 looks pretty good. I'm not the biggest fan of the Z23, unfortunately. That's a shame because I'm not really a fan of most of the ships they've chosen. But as Tom has pointed out, now it makes sense why the Kansas is so slow when you look at that bar.
That is not a hydrodynamic design at all.
But it looks amazing. It almost makes you want to play Kansas, and then I remember that it's Kansas.
If only it wasn't the Kansas.
Yeah, Baltimore is... I don't know, I think Baltimore is the weakest of the designs, personally.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit more generic looking overall. That's almost closer to some of the... I forget which set of spacey camos it was now, but like the Pensacola, for example. I think was one of the ones that had that kind of style, where it's the kind of lighter.
Yeah, they did them. I feel like most of the other space camos are a bit sleeker. Those are a bit more
ones. That's
ships.
the word I was looking for. The bionic space camos.
Yeah, I mean the bionics are like they don't really change the form of the ship, right? Because they can be applied to a bunch of them. I think.
Yeah.
They just make it look spacey.
I have to say the disposable camos I'm not particularly impressed by.
I mean, I don't like the green one that much.
They're not the ugliest ones, but especially that Free Planets Alliance one, that looks like some kind of hideous 1970s bathroom tile design.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. The other one, the Galactic Empire, looks quite decent. I'd be fine with it. I mean, for a disposable camo, it's okay. But yeah, I think that the Z23 like wins this camo competition. The carrier would also look pretty cool. It's just a carrier, so I don't care that much. But that set, I might have to play the set just for its looks.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this does and if we get any more of these styled camos in the future. I'm sure people who like this anime are probably...
I mean, I haven't heard about the anime. It's like we'll see how the anime sells without the girls, I guess.
I might have to look it up and see if it's any good or not.
Of course, you also have a picture here about the loot box because they would never do like a call-up and introduce new stuff without stopping there. Like there are no details yet, I think, but you know they've stuffed it in loot boxes because hey. And obviously, everybody's hero torpedo guy is also. And then there are some patches. I don't think people care too much about that.
Yeah, the patches at least look all right. I imagine that'll be gained through the boxes.
And I mean, at least this being an anime call-up again, they'll probably have actual unique voiceovers, not just the growl that you can't hear over a generic voice. So
yeah, that was kind of bad. Right, apparently it's on Crunchyroll, so I will watch it at some point, and I'll report back how the anime was.
It's good. So if we never hear from you again, it was either so great that you haven't stopped watching, or you couldn't take it.
Yeah. But I just had to, go into hermit modes and reassess where I've gone wrong with my life.
Exactly. Yeah,
I think that's about us. It's just one of our shorter ones. We're only just over an hour, for goodness sake.
Yeah, exactly. We've once again only gone a little bit over the planned time.
Although, to be fair, there wasn't a huge amount of news this week.
Yeah,
talk about. So yeah.
And I mean, a lot of the news was like I mean, there is only so often like it's I think the fourth time or so on the podcast we're talking about subs because they just kept being shoved in our face, and nothing ever changes really.
Not appreciably, anyway.
So yeah, I think we can call it a night here. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us. And we should be back next week.
Yep. Bye from me and Sam, who's lurking on the table somewhere.
Yep, my cats are hiding somewhere, I suppose. So maybe they'll also be back next week, or maybe they'll hang out elsewhere. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.
Bye.